Did you?
Well, now I built a room in my house, so I don't have to do that.
That's a good thing.
Yeah,
That's a good
It's
thing.
nice.
Yeah.
I never minded the ride around the bay.
No, I don't.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I don't understand. Even today, there wasn't much traffic, really. I was pretty early. I mean, I left here at like, I don't know, 8:15 or something, so.
Everything that matters.
The chickens are ready? Oh, I was gonna say that. Salad becomes a lot busier over there than here.
Yes, it is. That's for sure.
Yeah, I grew up in Petoskey.
Oh, did you? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, long time.
Well,
Then we've been gone for about 30 years.
oh, then you went somewhere and then came back.
Yeah, just
Oh.
downstate,
Okay, okay.
not too far.
I grew up in Ann Arbor. So this is- Even though it's busy up here, it's pretty small town. so.
Yeah, family in it, that area.
It's a great part of the state.
Mm,
If you
sure
want to be
is.
downstate, it's a
Yeah,
great-
it sure
Ann
is.
Arbor's
Lots
great.
going on
Yeah.
culturally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I lived there for a couple of years, went to a little Washington Community
Yeah.
College there.
Yeah,
Great little school.
it is. Yeah, it is.
Still enjoy Ann Arbor. Went to the, what's the little folk, the Ark.
I got it. So Rachel, how are things going? Are they okay?
Yeah,
Good.
I'm doing very well. Thank
Good.
you. Very happy.
Good.
Are you the new part?
I am.
I hear so many good things about.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
This is Patrick Wise. He
Oh,
doesn't have a
sorry.
name tag in front. But we'll-
I'll put a right one in
yeah.
there. Yeah, so anyway, I hear. I'm really happy to have you there.
Good.
Do you want me to text Dana?
You may, yeah, if you want to have a meeting. Sure, you free, right?
She's probably walking in the door, but.
That's usually how it happens.
How many are on the trip?
There's 5.
Okay.
Sue can't make it, and I didn't realize that Ben, he's on Isle Royale.
Oh,
for
good
the
for
past
him.
couple of
Isle
years.
Royale.
Isle Royale.
Mhm.
So I
Good for
don't know.
him.
Yep,
for
so that's why I couldn't get in touch with him the last.
Although I like Royale, but.
I know,
Yeah, it
Royale
sounds
is
much
a little
more
more.
sophisticated.
Just put a little emphasis on
I
it.
thought that's how it's pronounced. It makes it a little better.
Thanks.
Sorry, Victor, sorry.
It's all right. No, it's good. I need to be.
Now we know.
My wife corrects me all the time.
It sounded a lot better the way you say it, but I haven't ever been there. In all the time I've lived here, I've never been up there, but
I would like to go.
our son went. I think it's an incredible place. The boat ride can be a little tricky
Yeah.
and I get really seasick, so I have to.
How long is it? The boat ride?
I don't know, several hours.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
so
it's
it's.
got it at least.
Yeah, and it can be
Couple
really
hours.
Because I know
rough.
some people fly.
Yeah, it can be really rough up there, but it's beautiful. I mean,
Right.
it's a beautiful part of
Where's that, out in Lake Michigan? Or here? South Lake Michigan or here?
Oh, it's Superior.
Superior.
Yeah.
It's on like a tip.
You go up to the top of the UP, you catch a ferry,
Copper Harbor, right?
Copper Harbor, and then maybe there's one other place it sometimes comes out of.
Oh, man.
A lot of people don't even know it exists. You know, people live in Michigan their whole life and they don't even know.
Yeah, especially if they're not outdoors or boat
Right.
people, yeah. It's pretty, the young man our son went with, when he went, was actually in the Navy. And he was on leave and they got caught on Isle Royale and couldn't get off because of the weather.
Yeah.
And they didn't, it was, cell phones don't work up there.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting situation for him, because he couldn't, they ended up letting him make a phone call from one of the fixed lines.
Sorry.
That's okay. Hey, shot you next. How are you?
Like, I think you're gonna get
Where
stuck.
are
I'm
you,
like,
right?
No, I just said.
Oh, that would be helpful.
Or no.
Yeah.
Tags.
Hold on the base there.
So we, people know who you are, Dan.
Right, one of those is yours. I didn't know you guys.
Oh.
Sue will not be here, Dennis, so you're running the show.
Okay, cool.
I just had some friends shop stuff down from Good Heart. Suddenly,
That all happens.
I know, I said,
Yeah,
I got
walking out the door, I have to go.
did you know other Parks and Rec directors in the Grand Rapids area?
I do not.
Oh, you did not, okay, because one of them used to be the Parks and Rec for East Grand Rapids.
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool, it's 12:05. Let's call this meeting to order. Victor, would you like to do roll call?
Yep, Patrick Wise, Nancy Rondell,
Yep,
Dan Mulder,
Yep.
Sure. All right, we have a quorum. Sue has texted me saying that she's just not feeling well, so.
Okay. Sounds good.
Also, I'll let you know about Ben. I've been trying to contact Ben, but he's at Isle Royal for the past couple of weeks, so we won't be able to address some of the things that we need him for another at least week we can have, so just FYI.
What a cool trip.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's on my bucket list.
Is it, we were
It's
just talking
awesome.
about it. Yeah.
I've done that hike. It's awesome, and there's no cell service up there. I just spent 3 days in Copper Harbor without Wi-Fi. It's like.
That's good for you once in a while.
It's really
Fine, I
good.
gotta go find
Turning
it
off,
out.
shutting down.
Yeah.
Great. Did everybody have a chance to look at the minutes?
Yes.
Good. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second it? Great.
motion by Karen, second by Nancy, all in favor?
Aye. Victor, board communications.
Yes. So just very briefly, I did submit our Tree City USA application last week. I haven't heard back from them yet, and I'm not sure exactly how long the approval process takes. It does require review and evaluation and certification by a forester. So I can constantly check the status. So the past few days I've checked it, no progress there, but I'll let you guys know when we hear back on that. Layton Park tree plantings, Ben is holding on to the trees that we have. I had Lucas review locations. Some of them were under overhead wires, so we kind of switched them across the street in empty spots. About 3 of them, I think, but they're in the general same location. So once I get confirmation again from Ben, when he comes back in town, that those are okay locations, I'll send out those letters. Travers Street donation, we're still looking at appropriate locations. When we were doing it, we noted an issue that our vegetation management street tree planting guides, have the 30 feet from the corner, 20 feet in between trees. So that part of Travers Street is kind of a tight fit. So we need to relook at, can trees fit in there per standards, those guidelines, can those guidelines be altered a little at all? So we'll have to look into that and see if, see exactly where, per our guidelines, where those trees can go and what it'll look like in the future. So once Ben is back, we'll have more on that. So those are just some basic updates.
We're on Travers, I
So
forgot.
south of Main Street, so on both sides,
Okay,
all the way down to Travers, to Harbor Point essentially, is what Ron Fennick is looking at.
so because Holy Childhood's property is.
Is north, on the north side of Main Street.
Right.
So he's looking at Travers Street south.
I get it, okay,
Yeah,
I get it.
Toward the harbor.
From hillside, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Hillside down to the
Okay.
point.
Do we have any requests for monoculture again or anything like what
We
happened
didn't.
last time?
We didn't get that far yet.
Okay.
We just got to the point of, is it doable? And we're still looking at that. Is it just to plant any tree there? So.
And then I guess back to the original discussion of how many more trees do we want to plant without a maintenance plan and watering plan and all that stuff?
And I did briefly talk to that with Ben about that, and one of the ideas was, obviously, we can still get a maintenance and watering plan, but is maybe we need to up the donation, the amount per tree that's donated, so we can cover that for like
That into a
water.
fund.
Yeah, exactly. So right now, we have $500 per tree, and we might need to look at if that's the appropriate number for a donate a tree program. But in a case like this, where, you might be donating 20 trees, for example, $10,000, maybe we say, but we really need $12,000 or $13,000 to cover 20 trees as opposed to $10,000.
Or we could do 15 trees for this amount.
Exactly.
Something like that,
Yep.
so.
Yeah, so whatever amount he wants to give, we say, it's probably gonna take $800
Right.
to maintain this tree. So anyway, but yeah, so we talked about 2 different possibilities. One is, do we want to wait till we have a maintenance plan in place? Or do we just adjust as needed while we do a maintenance plan? So there's a couple options.
Can we ask the people that are donating trees to donate a little bit more towards maintenance afterwards?
We'd have to we could go to council just to get that fee, it's not a fee, but that donation amount approved. But we put it in place, I believe in 14 or 15, that maybe 15 or 16, that amount of money, $500. So it hasn't changed drastically in 5 years, but maybe what changed is our understanding of what actually needed to go into maintaining the tree.
Yeah, and I know for a fact tree prices have gone up, so, so we had to get that 500 approved by council the first time?
I believe so. I mean, the program was approved by council, so I'm with the money of $500. So, I mean, it's not that I don't think council could, it's not nothing major. It's just, we'd have
I
to.
just wonder if we want to up it, do we really need their approval or? can
Well,
we
yeah,
just-
the reason is because they set all fees and this kind of fits in the fee, like, not quite, but it's kind of in that category. Because what we're doing is we don't want to charge more than it costs to plant the tree. And technically council is supposed to ensure that whatever costs that we implement at the city are not going above and beyond what it actually costs to do something.
So I wonder if there's anything out there, and I can look into this, like industry standards for cost of maintaining a tree over 20 years is the tree plus 20% or the tree plus 50%. So maybe there's something out there, I don't know.
Yeah, maybe if you could look into that. We need to make sure we're consistent though, because when we do, we don't want to say that, we need to maintain the tree for 20 years necessarily, because that gives the illusion that we are going to keep that tree around for
If it
20
dies,
years.
it could be
Yeah.
good running.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
5
just-
years or.
Yeah, you typically, what Ben has recommended is 3 to 5 years, is that like, when people plant street trees, I think it's been 3 to 5 years, is like, you get guaranteed that it'll survive for 3 or 5 years, I forget what it is, so 20 years is hard with street trees, especially. But anyway, that's,
Okay. But I think the cost of maintenance isn't already figured into the city budget, right?
well,
So-
it is, and we'll get to that at that meeting. So in these, I think it was to a certain extent in this donate a tree. I just don't know to what extent, because I don't think we took everything into, we posted an ad in the newspaper thanking them. We underestimated how much that cost, right? That's usually, it's sometimes over $100. So that takes away from a big part of the donation, right? Then there's maintenance, all right, but where we were calculating, all right, how much does it take the DPW to go there and water it? But realistically, is the DPW watering every tree that's donated? Do we need gator bags? Do we need an irrigation system? I don't think we got in that in depth. We just said trees cost between $200 and $300 for the type of tree that normally request, and then extra couple $100 for maintenance, not really knowing exactly, or for actually having someone plant the tree if it wasn't DPW, contracting.
Yeah,
with someone.
actually, the installed price for a tree is 500.
Yeah,
So
so.
usually it's the materials times 2 or 2.5 even.
So that might have just been what we did. So I think for what we're offering, it's under, $500 is low for what we're
It
offering.
is, I think, yeah.
So Ben's digging into that a little bit too, then, the cost of maintenance. and see if
Yeah,
we're
but I
trying to
think
write them
for
up.
this one, for donating a tree program, if Danica could just look at specifically, Ben and I are gonna focus on we'll get to that later, overall tree maintenance costs and what those are gonna, for the city's tree inventory, as opposed to the specific program. This is for new trees.
I'd like to bring up a thought too, and maybe, I don't know if we want to discuss it now or at a future meeting, but any thoughts about having like even just a half-time city tree person to take care of trees, to water trees, to, I don't know. Or an
Where's
arborist.
possible, though, where's the
on
money gonna
staff.
come from? That's the question. Where's the money gonna come from?
Yep, general fund.
Yep, and
So-
I don't think we have the ability to keep on adding new staff to the general fund without any kind of increase in revenue coming in. It's just,
We're a small
unless
town, we
we
don't
cut
have a lot
something
of
else.
money, but just for down the road, I know there's a lot of communities that do have an arborist on staff. And they direct, the DPW guys, give them training, work out watering, I don't know.
It's not a bad idea. It's just come down to money issue.
Are there grants available for that kind of thing?
Not for staffing.
Not even for an arborist type of person who isn't really a staff member?
There might be grants available for someone that I've seen to come out and teach or educate like a program, but not for to be on staff. I mean,
Like a contract labor.
yeah, I mean,
Opposed with staff,
Right,
we have to do benefits and everything for it.
right. Contract labor, maybe there's grants for that.
There might, like for a 2-time or a seminar for a weekend or something, maybe, I don't.
and we have our contractor arbor, and we can at any time say, Ben, we need you to go there and educate. It's just about,
Some training.
we'll get into that with the budget discussion. I think that's all part of the maintenance and care costs. So we can get to that later.
Okay, any public comment today? Rachel?
I'm Rachel, Living Parks Director. I've met most of you.
Mrs. Patrick, you might be the one you haven't
Yeah.
met
Yeah,
yet.
Introduced.
So I'm just here to listen and be a part of it.
Thanks.
Parks and trees, yeah.
All together.
They go together. Thanks for coming, Rachel.
Thank you.
Good, old business.
Yep, so the number was outreach efforts. I guess I call this solidify plans, only because I don't think this needs a lot of discussion, but I met with Dana and Karen, and I think we had a good plan going. I know Dana then sent me a follow-up email saying we should hold off for a little bit because we're kind of busy with other things going on.
I just want to say that that wasn't necessarily anything to do with me or Karen. It just seemed like you have had so much on your plate at the
No, I
time.
get that. No, I just want to make sure that what I am capable of doing things, as long as I know is when I'm going to get it from you guys. So there's not as much on this on my end. Most of it is you coming up with the material, then me reviewing it and putting it out there. So that doesn't take a lot of time for me. I just want to make sure I know when. Yeah, and so whenever you guys want to get started on that, I'm fine with that.
I know one thing we talked about was whether or not Charles would be willing to donate a corner for, a series of articles over the year. Did he get any feedback to you on that?
I didn't go I didn't move forward on that because
Okay.
it was just,
Okay.
I held off. So I can move forward on that.
So I sent, all of you got a copy of the proposed outreach plan for education.
Yeah.
And then in that, for the last meeting we had, I did tag it to sections of the tree plan. And so then Dan and I talked briefly about where we might start with fall topics. And I think we need to keep it simple. So I think your input would be really important there. What I had suggested was let's talk about locations for new trees, where they're going to be planted, how we go about doing that, how we go about selecting those places. And then another part, how to prepare trees for fall, which is a totally different topic, I know. And then what are the rights and responsibilities of property owners, just kind of as part of getting that information out so people can start thinking about it. And just kind of keeping it simple that way. I don't know if we would cover all three topics at the same time, but maybe they could go over a couple of months. I don't think they need to be too detailed because I think we keep referencing back to the plan. So
I think that's fine. I think spreading them out is a good idea too.
I think one topic at a time,
Yeah.
people will absorb better,
yes,
because a lot of people don't know anything about it
for sure.
at all. I
Yeah.
mean, most people, I would guess that most people that live in Harbor Springs don't even know there's a tree committee and a tree plan,
Right.
unless they happen to just be people really interested
Or they
in
went to
that.
the Arbor Day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that aspect, but I think a simple one-shot thing that they can take away
Yeah,
would be great.
absolutely.
We had also discussed, one topic plus maybe one tree.
And one tree at a time.
Yeah,
So
but,
two things, here's one of the trees in your community and
Oh,
here's
yeah.
a topic.
Yeah,
Right.
And then I could add that I was thinking about this and just to have people thinking about, why they should care. Right, start with that, sort of that
Right.
bird's eye view, what I mean? Because if we begin to care about something,
Right.
then we can engage
Then we
with
pay
it, right?
attention.
Yeah, they need to take ownership of it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
think
why it's
that's good.
important.
Yeah, I think that would be a great start.
So maybe a first topic would be, why is our tree plan important, or why are trees
Why
important?
are trees important?
Okay.
Right.
In our small town, why are trees important?
Right.
And I'd just like to speak to also, you guys mentioned to me about doing an illustration for that.
Yeah. Right.
And so to answer you, I would be happy to do that. And so I have a couple of different ideas. I would get talk another time or back and forth in emails
Great.
and sketches.
Do you have
I've already started on
something
it.
you've done already? Now you've got my
So
curiosity.
Yeah.
I've started on it and but we can do that with emails, I suppose.
So one idea I had was naming the topic or that section of the paper, wherever it ends up, the tree canopy. And I can see you drawing a really cool picture of a tree canopy, and then the article appears under that. So that same look appears in every single article that gets written in the Harbor Light. So people would know it, that to look for it, under that canopy. That's an idea.
That's a good
I had.
idea.
Mhm.
So it's branding it, I mean, right
Absolutely.
away,
We gotta
yeah.
create the brand, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would think even if Charles wasn't willing to put it in for free all the time, maybe he'd at least let us get started for free. And see, 3 months, 6 months, something.
Well, maybe you could define the maximum number of words we could put in an article too. So
Right.
then we would know
Yeah.
how much we can say about
And
it,
how much space, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it is kind of a community service.
Yeah.
But usually that's just a little blurb, right, Victor? It's not like a,
Well, we pay for almost everything we put in there.
really,
Yes, it's like advertising, it's like an advertising space, so all our notices go in there, they're all paid, so.
do you feel like there'd be some budget for tree canopy?
I mean, there could be, I mean, if it's small, but that's what I'm getting, depends on how long this article is, right? Because if you're talking about a quarter of a page, that, they get expensive, I mean, that's what we ran into with when we were thanking our donors with that quarter page. Thank you for your donation, it was running us over $100 just for that. So, $100 something. So we try to get it down to like $60 by making it very small now. So, I mean,
Like an eighth of a page, kind of like a column?
yeah, I'd have to look at his prices. I don't normally deal with what the prices are, for what, but I can check with him, but.
How often do we think we would do it? I think we'd have to do it often enough that people would look forward to it. Like if we did it 4 times a year, I think people would forget about it in between.
My other
Maybe.
question, my other response, we talked about this was, I'd have to check with Charles on it, but typically newspapers, whatever content you put in their newspaper, it's for the newspaper. If you put it somewhere else for free, they don't like that, right? So if we're offering it on our social media, the same exact contact on Facebook and our website
Yeah.
for free, and then we're saying, all right, Charles, here you go, can you do this for free as well? They tend to want to have unique material readers have to go to them to see it.
Right, so they buy the newspaper instead of seeing it for free on Facebook.
Unless we pay for it as an ad, and that's usually, then we have to pay for it as an ad, and then we can, he has no problems over that, so. I know, it's just a thought, I'll ask him that, but it's.
I mean, we're gonna be coming into winter, so I don't know how much we can say during the winter months, except preparing people for spring, but maybe it's a series of just over, every other week or something, 3 short articles until we start getting into colder weather and all the leaves come off.
I think that's too often, maybe.
I think once a
Maybe 2.
month.
Once a month.
Yeah, we can keep it consistent.
Yeah, like the first paper of the month or whatever,
Yeah,
whatever
we
one
choose.
is.
Right.
And I certainly would not fault Charles for charging us for it. I mean, that's his business.
Business,
right.
And if he charged us and that allowed us to then feel good about putting it on social media, the trade-off's probably worth that, in all honesty.
Yeah.
Probably get more.
So that
readership
should be
on-
$1,200 a year then if we
I don't know the price, it could be more, I mean, it depends on how many words we're talking about, how big it is, so yeah.
we have a budget,
I mean,
the tree board for stuff like this, or?
we don't really just have a budget anyway. The way when we put in newspaper, it's just like, we base our budgeting, the way we budget forward is based on past practice, right? So if we look at the last few years and say, all right, the last few years, this is how many advertisements we put into Harbor Light. So we're gonna anticipate that next year, we're gonna need this much money because we post public notices, we post all this. So we've never posted anything about trees in the budget in the Harbor Light. So maybe once or twice, but not consistently. So there's not been a budget per se we look at it and say, hey, we have this much money to work with. Normally what we do here is with Nick and I, we're constantly looking at the budget to see if we're over, under where we're at, and see where we have wiggle room to say, all right, we have some space now. We can, we didn't spend as much money on this year, so maybe we can spend a little bit more money. Then we go to council at the end of the year for a revised amended budget. They normally approve that as long as we don't go over on things that we anticipated that we weren't going to go over on. So
So if we're thinking we might want to do once a month, $1,200, could that be a line item that would go into council for?
we would just have
approval,
to, when we go to council for budgeting season, we'd have to say, we're having an increase under there's in the budget section that I go over, there's a trees and bluffside management. We'll probably just say, hey, we want to up this budget to include, we want to increase this budget for trees. We're not just gonna say, can you give us $1,000 to do advertisements? I mean, I can approve that on my own technically, but what we want to do is we want to spend $40,000 or whatever the number is on trees this year. And this is what's going to be included in that, budgeting, maintenance, care, et cetera. Can we have that budget? Essentially is what we're asking. And then another way to look at it as well is Nick has to look at the potential revenue we're going to get next year, right? So if he says we're going to get X amount of revenue, he has to make sure that whatever we budget for is not gonna exceed the revenue we're gonna get. And council has to look at that and say, all right, where are our priorities? You know, are trees priorities or something else priorities? And that's gonna be a challenge, especially if the Headley Amendment doesn't go through, because then we have fewer options to,
I wonder if we want to think about, some type of revenue stream for tree board for stuff like this.
yeah, we can get to that in the next section. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I kind of, one idea might be to put it out there for sponsorships. Maybe local landscapers would be willing to sponsor.
It's a good
I
idea.
know,
like
an
that.
article,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
like that a lot. Yeah,
Because then their name gets out in front of people and they're part of the tree world and.
but they don't get to write it.
Yeah, right, but if they're willing to sponsor it, yeah.
That's actually a good idea.
Yeah,
a really
that might
good
be a good idea. We have a number of landscapers in the area,
Right.
you might be able to.
And I kind
cover
of
most
most
of
of
them.
Yeah, you do.
Good
Talk to
idea.
Charles about all that, yeah.
Yeah, and the tree canopy little graphic then each month could say sponsored by
Bye, yeah.
landscaping by boats.
Right,
or,
right.
Yeah,
That's a good idea, Karen.
yeah.
Or
Free, kinda
individuals
almost
that
$100
love
worth of
trees,
advertising.
sponsored
Yeah,
this month by
somebody
Sandy
else
Wolf.
could,
or-
yeah.
Right.
So I guess if we have some direction from Charles in terms of how long we can make these, then you and I can get to work on some of that. I can write some of the journal stuff and,
And Pat
Kind of
can
artwork.
yeah,
kind of-
Patrick, yeah.
drawing you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, are you doing like hand sketches or are you doing computer?
It'd be hand, so, keep it real graphic, I think,
Yeah, exactly.
Catch attention. Make
Sounds
something
good.
simple.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Simple's always good.
Yeah.
So once I come up with, I shouldn't say what tree do we want? Well, we're getting way ahead of it here.
Yeah,
Let's find out, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'll find out about this, and I think I'm fine. I think we had like, from the last meeting that I wasn't here at was, Karen and Dan, I can kind of take this as a subcommittee kind of thing on your own if you want to tackle that, the details of it, but, so yeah, I'll get back, I'll reach out to Charles.
Patrick,
Well, yeah, but we can't have more than, on the committee, more than two.
And the
Oh,
food,
because- because you gotta
yeah,
do a quorum. But we can rely on Patrick in this committee for the drawing.
Absolutely.
Be the drawing committee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
great.
think that's fine, plan. I'll reach out to Charles
Okay,
and see
Okay,
what.
what he says.
Excellent.
The other place that it could go, I don't know if that makes sense or not, would be in the chamber newsletter. Would that be another place
I mean,
that,
they get a lot of, they have a lot of readers.
they have a lot of, it's just another
Good
thought.
idea.
We are a member of the city is a member of the
Yeah.
chamber, so.
So I
Yeah.
might, especially in the winter time when there's not a
Yeah.
whole lot going on, it might be another place that.
It's a good idea.
So I got a quick thing I gotta do here. Work thing.
Okay.
You guys can still talk.
Okay, you want to move on to the next section? Sure. All right, so I kind of gave an overview of budgeting for tree care and plantings, and I kind of started big picture with the city budget. Nancy's heard this a little bit, but it's always good for a refresher. So the city budget consists of several different funds. Some of those funds are general fund, which is generally tax money, tax revenue, but also donations and other kinds of smaller revenues, permit fees, et cetera. We have electric fund, water fund. We have two separate street funds, downtown fund, and some others, like the Blackbird Museum Fund. So we have a few funds. Those other funds like the electric fund and water fund, they're enterprise funds. That means all the money that goes into those funds are money we make off the business, right? So the waterfront fund is money we make off of docks and slips and moorings and kayaks. Electric fund is money we make from utilities and so forth. General fund, as I said, is mostly tax revenue with some donations and some permit fees and other things. And the cost for tree plantings, the maintenance and administration primarily comes from that general fund. I say primarily because sometimes that work might be done with DPW when it comes to a street project. DPW might do some work for a street project that involves trimming, cutting trees, and that would go toward that project, which would go under street funds, or for electric fund for trimming any tree branches that are interfering with utilities, or to the waterfront fund. If it's a waterfront park, we split our money up between the general fund and the waterfront park for what kind of activity goes down there. So if we're taking down a tree or trimming a tree or planting a tree, some of that, it kind of gets divvied up between the two separate funds. But most of it primarily comes from the general fund. And Oh, I'll also mention DDA. Sometimes theoretically, tree plantings in downtown and removal can be allocated to DDA as well, so. But primarily it's a general fund, and that usually the general fund, the main sources of expenses in general fund are the police department, city hall staff, zoning administration, assessing, brush and refuse pickup. Those are like the big things. We do have a small category for trees in there as well. And while there's no specific like line item that says donate a tree program revenue or street tree planting application fees, we do have general lines in our thing revenue for permit fees, application fees that we get, donation fees. And for those donations, Nick keeps track in a separate Excel sheet of donations we receive for trees and how much money we have left to work with as far as tree plantings. When it comes to costs, our primary section is called the trees and bluff side management section. Again, we do put some expenditures toward DPW administration for Lucas's time and parks and grounds for occasional tree removal in parks, as well as a DPW parks staff time and watering trees and et cetera. But mostly our budget item comes from trees and bluff side management. And here you primarily see things that's, Ben Vealing's costs, right? For his company, right? His contractual services. You see that line item 801, $5,600, 2017, 2018, $22,000, $8,000. And this is for like spraying, tree plantings that he does installation, assessment, inventory work for us. And Ben has been really, I would say really generous to the city, is where a lot of his time he doesn't charge or he charges at cost. So like, this is not a true reflection of how much it actually costs for Ben's time. Salaries and wages are generally staff time that I spend administrating or whatnot, staff does, right? Wages, preparing for tree board meetings, and dealing with vegetation management requests, street tree planting requests. For example, the vegetation management trimming requests, those can be real burdensome sometimes, because there's a lot to review, a lot to coordinate. We just had one approved for Shea Park, for example. So they're not Shea Park, Shea Drain, I should say, Shea Drain. Those are not, so those are where wages, salaries, that's where that comes in. You'll see the other line items, Social Security, retirement. Operating supplies can be equipment, certain supplies we need. Then there's equipment rental. So this is really where we have I think, is an opportunity to allocate certain tree costs. As I mentioned, what we do is we take the last previous years, how much we've spent, and then we kind of average that out, anticipating how much we would need for the next year, right? So 2017, 2018, 2019, you see 20,000, then 36,000, and then 28,000. So for 2020, we were like, all right, we need about $27,000. But this is not based on any sort of plan. So what we need, according to what Ben was talking at the last meeting when I listened to the recording, was we need a planned tree care and maintenance program and budget. And to know that, we need to get Ben's opinion on what needs to be done for care and maintenance. How much will it cost to water the trees or install irrigation systems, to prune the trees, to treat for diseases, and et cetera. All the things that come with planting and care and maintenance. And once we get that cost, then we have an idea of, all right, to keep up with our inventory, I'm gonna throw out a number, I don't know if it's true or not, $100,000. Let me just say that. I could be way off. And then we were like, all right, that's not feasible to get this first year, but maybe we can go to council for an assay. You know what? We need $100,000 to maintain our trees, but can we start we really want to focus on maybe street trees this year, or maybe certain park trees, and that's going to cost us $15,000 or $20,000. Can we get that in the budget? But we won't know that unless we have a plan and let's present a plan to council. So I think that's what our goal is. That's my take on it. And then we can incorporate that into this tree and bluff side management line item, quote unquote, or section of the budget, and just say, have maybe a thing that's called, it doesn't necessarily won't be called care and maintenance. It would just be divvied up between operating supplies, wages, salaries, contractual services, and equipment rental. But we would have our own plan in-house, knowing about how we're spending that money and for what. And that's how our budget, that's just the way our budget works. We're not the type of budget where we divvy out everything. Like, I don't keep track of every single hour right? Some states require it and some entities require that you keep track of every single hour and code it to what you're doing. So I don't sit at the end of the week and say, all right, I spent 3 hours and 42 minutes on tree board stuff, 2 hours on council stuff or whatnot. So we don't approach budgeting that way. So this is how we generally approach budgeting. And anyways, a good overview for you to understand that. And then where I think we need to go with developing a tree care maintenance plan budget.
So if we do that and come up with a figure, does that mean it'll have to come from someplace else in the budget?
Well, it depends. So that really depends, right? Either it has to come from somewhere else. We have to find a way to increase revenue. And that could be, talk about different options, whether it's, taxes or whether it's through donations or whether it's through something. I mean, that's the only way is either to cut something or to increase revenue somewhere else.
Are we envisioning that these maintenance activities would be conducted by DPW and then would do training sessions?
I mean, it could be a mix. I mean, I think that's open to, that's open. I mean, Ben has his own company, right? I don't know how much, time and he can or will allot. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be Ben. I mean, there'd be certain things where Ben has been doing for us that I think have worked well, like spraying, but maybe he doesn't have time to water and trim, and maybe DPW can be trained or not. I don't know. But we got to remember though, is if we're going to train DPW to do it and they're going to have to do it, we might need then is where we might need more staff at DPW because they already have their whole list of things they need to do now. And by adding this tree maintenance program, quote unquote, we'd be adding more time to them. So either the guys have to work overtime or they'd have to cut other things that they're doing without finding more. That's why sometimes we contract, right? Because DPW can't do it. I mean, the ironic thing about that is when trees need watering, right? That's when DPW is the busiest the most. Like they're getting ready for their spring, they're getting ready for everyone to come here, they're getting everything ready for the summer, and then the fall cleanup when we still need to plant trees and what they're getting busy getting ready for winter. So it's really it's hard, to say just put it on to DPW without
Maybe
increasing
maybe
hours.
it's like a seasonal college student or something, because really, there's 5 months of the year where the trees, we need to do anything with trees, watering, trimming, et cetera.
And we do that with parks, right? So we have Rob, who's like a part-time parks guy. He's not year-round, but he's seasonal and like to be year-round. We'd like to find people that are year-round. But it could be something similar to that. Right? We have someone that's part-time that does these things, and that would be fine. But I mean, we had hard enough time finding one person for parks to do stuff like this, right? I mean,
Would it be an internship for somebody
I was
who's
just gonna
studying
say,
this?
has anybody ever talked to Pond Hill?
we could do an internship.
They use a lot of
Yeah.
interns from Michigan State in the horticulture.
We have to pay our interns, which is fine, but we have to pay our interns. Government has to.
Government, well,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. So
but
it's still paid.
still, I just wonder if anybody's ever explored that
Yeah, like
option.
Yeah.
Parks intern should be fairly easy because we're in Central Michigan University. It's like
Right.
one of the biggest recreation programs in the country.
And Michigan
Yeah.
State has the horticulture and that stuff, it might be a,
And Victor and I have discussed hiring a couple more parks, seasonal staff or otherwise.
And that's a
It's
good
just whether
point.
they live here or not, 'cause finding
Well,
housing here.
Yeah, and they have big forestry programs up at Michigan Tech,
Yeah.
at Northern Michigan, at U of M.
And how we do this can be divvied up, right? I mean, if it's parks, let's say this year we're focusing on trees in the parks, right? Well, that could be a fall under Rachel, doesn't need to fall under DPW, and we have, a part-time person that's helping you take care of trees, maybe, but also doing other things, right? So that could be part of it. And then, but if it's street trees we're focusing on, then it'd have to be a DPW, more of a DPW expense. So, I mean, there's different ways we can break this down. I mean, there's no shortage of solutions, but it also always comes back down to money. And the question is how much and what is actually, we need to determine what is actually needed. And that's where I think Ben's opinion here, his analysis of, because he's talked about this a lot. He's like, we need to maintain trees, we need to maintain our inventory. He's been hammering that in.
We're all in
So I
agreement.
would like to see from him, all right, you say we need to do this. What is it that we need to do and how much is it going to cost?
If I may, just to
Yeah.
piggyback on that, I heard Ben say last week, some of his frustration is that this idea of caring for, so the focus would be to care for what we have.
Right.
He said we have to take care of what we have more than once, sort of emphasize that, so I heard that strongly.
Mhm.
So this maintenance plan would just be caring for what we have, not talking
Not to
about.
add new stuff.
Right, you talked about the cart before the horse here, we need that maintenance plan is what I heard care about what we have.
Absolutely, yep,
And I think that will be an easier sell at council too,
and doing something new.
right now especially.
Well, and because it's not as easy to envision, and some say it's far-fetched, but listen, if we don't maintain what we have now, that means in 5 to 10 years, DPW has to spend more money, or we have to spend more money as a city to contract someone to cut down a tree. And these big trees that if they're dying because they're not maintained, well, that could cost a couple $1,000s to remove a tree. And then we have to replace dead trees, right? Because if you don't want to have, a downtown with, half the trees are dead. So then we have to spend the extra money now to replace dead trees. If we would have spent less money on maintenance of them and carrying them, we would not have. So it's more of a long term, but you can't predict, which trees and how many are going to die next year or the year after from lack of maintenance. You just know some will. So it's hard to calculate that cost, but I think you know that trees dying will be in the future a longer term cost for the city.
Just from my perspective, I think really the single most important thing is going to be keeping the new trees watered for the first 2 years. And so I'm looking at the 35 trees, down by the church, the 17 trees here.
We got the irrigation system put here,
Okay,
which is good. And then.
so that's why the gator bags are off those. Yeah, the ones down on by the church though, those are looking a little rough.
Well, if we, I don't know if you heard anything, Rachel, about it. I don't know if we put I think we have
There's gator bags, but
Yeah.
last time I went by, there was no water in them.
Okay, so yeah.
And I think another thing, I think these donations are wonderful, but they do present a problem to us when it's 20 trees or 18 more. I don't know my exact numbers. And I think we have to think about how we encourage people to do that, but at the same time be realistic on we're struggling to maintain what we already have. So now we've planted a lot of new trees. And it's not that I don't think we should take the donation, but I think we need to be mindful of that, these big donations, because it does drive our ongoing cost up.
Maybe it's
Which is
part
a
of
good
the,
point, yeah.
maybe it's part of the education thing. Yeah, the tree donation program is awesome, but please understand that part of that $500 will go towards maintenance. And that's how we're gonna, keep alive what you've given to the city. I think it's just this whole discussion of this is what we have to do to keep our trees alive. Just because you plant them doesn't mean that they're gonna last forever all by
$500 does
themselves.
not include maintenance, so all that includes is the tree and the
Right.
installation. So maybe an early thing we should do is try and go to council and get that bumped up to 700 or something.
Well, I think
Yeah.
too, with your folks that want to donate, it's wonderful, and I understand why they want to donate something they can see but rather than encouraging more tree donations, maybe we need to encourage donations to care for what we have for the next 4 years or
And
something.
we kind of started that with we have another plaque out there that's for donations that are under $500 that are not a donated tree, and that would go to our tree care fund.
Yeah.
We only have like 1 or 2 there.
And-
And it also worked with someone who accidentally trimmed down half their tree, thinking that they could. I said, well, instead of going to, it says we can fine you, instead of doing that, you want to donate to, and he said, I will donate my money to a tree care. So we have, there's a potential for that. People can donate to a tree care fund.
I think it's a little harder sell though. It's nothing, it's not.
Well, it's not as, you're right, it's not, but they still get their name on a plaque out there, that says I've donated to the tree care fund. I mean, they don't get a specific tree, but
Well, I think when, like Little Travers Conservancy, when they do the annual fundraiser, you can be a balsam donator. That means you've given $5,000 or whatever it is to LTC, for funding, or you could be a fur donator. I mean, we could have different levels of donations.
And we've talked about that
And
once, I think
it's not a
before.
bad idea.
before you were on it. That's why we kind of just stuck with what we have right there is a $500 program, and then the less than $500 program for, tree care, tree maintenance. That's kind of because we looked at those different options and we just thought that was too much at the time because, because we've only had one, big, the problem is with the big donations, like where are they gonna go? I mean, aside from like how we're gonna take care of them, like where are they gonna go? That they can be headaches of projects. So when you're saying like you can be a $5,000, $10,000 donor, that takes up lot of staff time,
Yeah,
more
sure.
than we get with the donation, so it's.
And I'm not suggesting those levels of donation, but at least be different levels. And I didn't know there was a little section where you could donate money
I
towards
did-
the maintenance.
I was just gonna say, I
Maybe
didn't know
that
that
would be a good
either,
thing
so
to talk
maybe.
about.
Advertised,
Newsletter.
So maybe that
Yeah.
needs to be one of
Yeah,
your
part of the
canopy.
Or part of the educational.
Yeah, part of
thing,
the education is that there is a fund to care
Yeah.
for trees. Yeah.
I don't know if this will help, but I'd be willing to look, M Parks, I'm a member of M Parks and RPA. And like where I came from, we didn't have a tree board, so just fell under parks, but you can look up all the other parks departments in Michigan's, what's the word I'm looking for, policies on donating trees. I'd be willing to look some up and send them
That'd
to
be great.
someone if they wanted to look at them, just to compare like prices and how they do it. So that's what I do when I have questions about what other places are doing.
That'd be
So,
awesome.
You know,
Yeah.
and that also brings to mind, when the governor announced the $250 million that was allocated to all of the state parks. I was told by the person who let me know she was announcing this, that there was also gonna be like $70 million that was gonna be used towards local parks.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard anything about that since. And I could ask Brad and ask him, but have you heard anything more? I think you and I talked about that
I
last
heard,
meeting.
yeah, I remember speaking to you about it. I did hear that that was a thing, and I'm on the email like update list for things like that through the governor's office, and I haven't gotten anything as for specifics, what it can be used for, when they'll be available.
I haven't heard
But once
anything
it's
about it.
available,
Yeah.
then I'm gonna dig way deep,
Go
so.
ahead. One way to get an intern sometimes.
Would you be willing to call and see what the status is?
Yeah.
Because that may be more important to the Parks Committee, but yeah.
So that's my goal. My goal then is, once Ben is back in town, I have a few things for him to do, but is to really start maybe just getting some numbers and a plan together for us. It doesn't have to be anything detailed, but it just give us a general idea of what needs to be done and how much it's gonna cost. And yeah, so.
So he could come up with how much it's gonna cost if he does it. Would we also
Well,
want to?
I don't, it's not so much about if he does it, just how much in general would something like this cost? Like, how much does it cost to, install irrigation system for how many trees we have, right, in certain locations? Because that's one big thing. Another thing he's been mentioning is like, sure, you can install all the irrigation systems you want, but without proper monitoring, so how much time is it gonna take and how much cost is it gonna take to monitor how much
I guess I was
water?
just referring to in-house versus, contract.
Well, so we could figure that out
Maybe it's
later.
equal. Maybe it's equal.
Because we could figure it out, it's just the problem with in-house is, great, you have a salaried employees, but then you have benefits and everything, so you have to tackle that onto the true cost of them doing things. And sometimes we don't have the equipment to do things that contractors have equipment, so it depends on what needs to be done. I mean, clearly like spraying, for example, spraying is just something, I think we have one certified sprayer and it's not for a whole bunch of stuff, so it's like,
Specialized.
exactly, there's, but then there's other things like, things that might not be related to trees, but that might affect trees in the natural environment, like invasive species, right? To have someone to know how to monitor for these invasive species. I know Lucas does once in a while for invasive species, but if those take control over a park or a section of town that can compete with trees or native vegetation, that can affect the tree's ability to survive. So there's a lot of different things I think that go into it. And so as far as costs, I just want a general break. It doesn't matter if it's Ben or just what the general cost is for doing this, and the general amount of time it takes. Because if you go to different contractors, different arborists, person house, there'll be difference in numbers, but what we need is just a general idea. It's like, kind of like before you go out to bid, you just want to have a general idea of what you can expect for the bids you get back.
You think it would be helpful to have somebody call some other municipalities that might be like our size to find out how they handle tree maintenance? Or you think it's all gonna be kind of like how we do it, just kind of?
I think that could be done once we get an idea of what needs to be done. Because once we get an idea of what needs to be done, then the question is, how are we gonna do it? And that might be the point where we reach out to other communities to see how they do things.
How are you doing
Don't
it? How
you
are you-
already kind of know that though?
To a lesser extent, I mean, not many communities in this area have tree boards. I mean, I can tell you, we're one of the few in northern Michigan, if the only one with a tree board. I think Charlevoix has one, and then,
Well, I thought you were talking about in terms of just what needs to be done for maintenance of trees.
I have a very vague general idea of what needs to be done, but Ben can look at the inventory and say, we have, this types of species, and they, maybe different species need particular type of attention or trimming and spraying. And then the locations, how much water they get. I don't know, how much water, certain locations get more
He
water.
has a pretty good idea.
He'll have a good idea of that. He will have a good idea of that. And he can more easily get that information. But as far as how to go about doing it, that's where we would need to see what other communities are doing. Because Ben obviously knows more about the downstate, bigger communities, right? Ann Arbor, bigger communities that have these more extensive, expansive,
Yeah.
they have these programs, they're more expansive. We're a small town. I mean, small town with a lot going on.
Yeah, I wonder if we could ask them to approach it, kind of on maybe just a couple different levels, like there would be the Cadillac version of taking care of trees, and then there would be, what do we need to do to take care of trees the first 2 years to give them a good start, and most trees should be able to be on their own at that point. So I think could be a really big range in costs,
Yeah, I could ask him that. I mean, but I think where you're saying that after the first 2 years, they can survive on their own, I don't think that's necessarily true because street trees are just quite different than, you got salt coming at them, right? So if they're a street tree, even if they're salt tolerant or not salt tolerant, you gotta account for these things that could potentially, that you have to continually monitor for, right? So maybe they'll survive after the first 2 years on their own, but how well are they gonna survive,
there's nothing you can do about salt spray.
Maybe there's something we can do about looking at how we do our certain sections of our roads. Other communities use sand, but sand doesn't always work as well. So you get what I'm saying though, there's different spraying trees, you always have to spray certain trees regardless of how old they are, for certain diseases and certain
That would be
pests.
crab apples, and that's about it. Most trees you really don't ever spray. Most trees you don't ever fertilize, and I'm just afraid by saying, what do we need to do to maintain the trees? It's like an orthodontist. You go to an orthodontist, yes, you need this, this, and this, but you also could probably do just fine with this. So I'm just afraid we're going to get a cost back that's going to be, we're going to fertilize every tree every year, and that just really isn't necessary.
I think the beauty of that is he can give us a list of everything we need to do, and then we can say, all right, as a tree board, and say, all right, great, let's narrow it down to what we think is important. So
Okay.
I think that's
Fair
fine.
enough. Yep.
Yeah.
Because what council's gonna be looking for is a number,
Yeah.
before they okay anything on the budget.
No, I
especially
know
this
it,
year.
but what I'm saying
I do
is
it- I
there could
do
be
hear
a
what
really
you're saying.
expensive number and then
I
a
hear
number
what
that
you're
will
saying.
take care of things just fine.
I'm not looking for Ben from one. I'll rephrase. It's not gonna be, I'm not just interested in the final number. I'm interested in the numbers for doing particular things. So the numbers for
Yeah,
how much it'll cost to install, how many irrigation systems he needs that we think we need to install, how much it'll cost for gator bags, how much it'll cost for spraying, how much it'll cost for educating the DPW on how to properly, maybe get the proper equipment, like those. So I think I want to see a breakout,
yeah, that's what I was
and
gonna
then we can
suggest.
take
Yeah,
those
if we
costs
could-
and feel like what we need to do and add them together.
Well, then you can weigh in. you who are
Yeah.
very
Yeah, you guys are
helpful.
that.
not
Have
me.
line items, like,
Yeah.
fertilize every tree every year, then we can come back and say, well,
You can say,
maybe-
I don't think that's necessary.
Yeah, whatever. So
Yeah.
if it, like you said,
Yeah.
if it's by line item, that would be super helpful, I think.
Yeah,
So I'll talk to Ben about that.
yeah.
Cool.
I can't guarantee how long this might take us, a couple months.
Yep.
He's not coming back till the end of next week, so.
Well, and Ben
it's a
is
start.
an advisor.
Yeah.
I have to tell myself this all the time about planning commission and council and all that. Those are advising things, which is great because we don't have that, but then we here really get to decide on tree stuff, and then, of course, council has to say, okay, for the money part of it, but
Right.
they're gonna listen to what tree board says, because most of them don't know anything about trees.
Well, that was a good discussion.
So,
I think we have a
yeah.
good direction now
Yeah,
to
it
start
sounds
with Ben and
Sounds great.
see what he has to say.
Sounds
I think the
great.
fact there's a recognition that we need a budget is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
good step.
You know,
Yeah, it's a good step.
I don't know how much discussion happened in the past about having a budget. I know there was some, obviously, but I don't know, I think it's kind of interesting to look at the big picture.
That's a part of the
Different
tree
kind of
plan too. So-
Yeah, and the big issue has always been that and I know it's separate from the tree board, but and Nancy's heard this plenty of times, with the way the Headley Amendment and Proposal A is, we can't raise our millage rate if we wanted to. So every time we add something new to the budget is,
Tough year.
Right.
exactly.
Right, with that, like,
And then the trees is one section, right? So we're narrow, then there's all these other projects going on, all these other ideas, people want to do things, and that's great. We need a lot of revamp in our town, but at the same time, you know,
Well, we have to be responsible.
we have to be responsible and we have to look at, you know, what are our priorities if, for example, we don't get that increased revenue. And
Do we want to add fundraising to an agenda somewhere down the road, maybe? Like, for example, Fall Fest is coming up on October 2nd, first annual one at Marina Park, and we're gonna have a booth there for fundraising for the skate park, the new skate park. So for example, we could have a booth there for
Tree care.
the tree fund or tree
Tree care.
care. I mean, so just maybe we want to at some point discuss
I think-
fundraising
I think
for ourselves.
when we get our budget and this plan kind of together, I think it'd be great if people like to donate more when they know there's a project and end result. And if we can advertise it as is, we need $15,000 to install irrigation systems for our trees, or we need X amount of money for whatever it is, then people are more likely to, but if we just say we want money for trees, people are gonna be like,
Or if you did a specific park
yes.
at a time, some people are very committed to certain parks in this town. If you said, donate money for the trees at Kiwanis, or, you know, I think that's something else that might bring people's interest up to maybe.
Well, let's keep this
in the
fundraising thing
maintenance.
kind of on our radar.
Yeah, it should be something, because fundraising is always something we can do. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
so.
Good discussion. Any other thoughts on budgeting for right now?
I think this is, for me, this is good. I'm glad. It's very good.
Any other thoughts people want to bring up?
New business? All right, look at that, good time.
Okay, we are adjourned at
12:56.
12:53. Six.
7:06.
I have a silly question for you guys. I'm trying to follow your matrix here and I'm with the
Yeah.
numbers system. Maybe somebody could explain that to me.